Listening 3 PBIS4222 Module 6 Developing Diagrams. The topics will be learned of Module 6 are classifying oral explanation into diagrams, charts, completing diagrams, and developing diagrams or charts. Module 6, Unit 1 Classifying oral explanation into diagrams or charts. Module 6, Unit 1, Activity 1, Task 1.1 and Task 1.2. Science Library Attendance.
There are 200 students who are members of the Science Library. When the school year began in September, only 100 students visited the library. Attendance increased in October when 125 students visited the library. About 50 more students, making 175, attended the library in November. Attendance showed a small increase in December. Due to mid-year vacation in January, the attendance dropped. Only 50 students attended the library. Attendance increased again in February to 125 and in March to 150. There was a steady increase in April when attendance was about 165. Attendance reached the highest point in May and June, just before the period of examination. Attendance dropped to only 10 students with the beginning of the vacation period.
Module 6, Unit 1, Activity 2, Task 2.1 and Task 2.2. Use of club membership money.
The Science Club used the money received from memberships used in a variety of ways. There were 6 areas of expense which had to be covered by the income from members' dues. The largest shares, 50%, went for scholarship assistance to needy members. The second largest shares, 25%, was spent on producing the club's magazine. The next largest amount, 16%, was devoted to prizes for outstanding work in science by members of the club. The annual Science Club trip to the museum and scientific institution required 7% of the income from dues. The smallest amounts, 2% each, were spent on office supplies and in correspondence, including letters, telegrams, and long-distance telephone calls.
Module 6, Unit 1, Activity 3, Task 3.1 and Task 3.2. Global Families, Average Number of Children.
In the world as a whole, an average of 3.9 children are born to each woman. However, this average figure conceals wide variations. The highest average of 6.5 children are born to each African woman. The second highest average of 4.4 children are born to each woman of Latin America. Each woman of Asia is found to give birth of 4.2 children. Following data of childbirth average of Asia is the former Soviet Union. Each woman from the former Soviet Union gives birth to 2.3 children. The average number of children born by each woman from Oceania is 2.7 children. Yet, this is not the lowest average. The lowest average of 1.9 children are born to each woman from Europe and North America.
Module 6, Unit 1, Activity 4, Task 4.1 and Task 4.2. Consumption Expense.
In front of his staff, a manager of a business office explains about the expenses of the office for consumptions in a particular year. There are 4 types of expenses that we have to afford. They are food, clothing, housing, and durables. This report is based on last year's data. The highest expense was for food, which reached $4,250 million. The second highest was for clothing, which reached $3,000 million. The next expense was for housing, which took $2,500 million from our total assets. The smallest expense was for durables, which reached $2,000 million.
Do the formative test. Module 6 Formative Test 1. Why do children become so fearful?
Why do children become so fearful? For one thing, they become aware of just how small and powerless they are. For another, they cannot always tell fantasy from reality. In one study conducted by Bauer in 1976, almost 75% of kindergarteners expressed fear of ghosts and monsters, while only 50% of second graders and 5% of sixth graders did. Sometimes small children's imagination go wild, and they worry about being attacked by a lion, being in the dark, being abandoned, or falling from high places.
Module 6, Unit 2. Completing Diagrams. Module 6, Unit 2, Activity 5, Task 5.1, Task 5.2 and Task 5.3. Task 5.1, Task 5.2 and Task 5.3. Characteristics of criminals.
The main characteristics of criminals is that they are young males under 15 years old. 15 is the oldest age for violent crimes. Those arrested for the FBI's 7 major crimes in 1977 were mostly young. 16% were under 15. 41% were under 18. 59% were under 21. And 73% were under 25. An analysis of specific crime categories shows a high incidence of crimes committed by juveniles. Of those processed for motor vehicle theft in 1977, 64% were juveniles. 57% of those processed for burglary. 38% for stealing, 33% for robbery, 23% for forcible rape, 17% for dangerous attack, and 9% for murder. A large percentage of those arrested for arson and vandalism were also juveniles. Black citizens are arrested for a large percentage of all violent and property crimes. In 1977, they were arrested for 51% of all murders, 47% of all forcible rapes, 57% of robberies, 39% of dangerous attack, 29% of burglaries, 32% of stealing, and 26% of all motor vehicle thefts.
Module 6, Unit 2, Activity 6, Task 6.1 and Task 6.2. Business Assets.
There are many kinds of assets in business. Current assets and fixed assets are only two popular examples. Current assets are either cash of items which will be turned into cash during the current business periods, such as merchandise to be sold and receivables. All of these assets are known as liquid assets. Fixed assets are those that will be kept and used for a long time. Fixed assets are usually itemized according to their use to the firm. New machinery and production equipment are valued at their cost. As the equipment is used, its value decreases. This decrease in value is called depreciation. Depreciation is usually calculated on a yearly basis by dividing the total cost of the equipment by the number of years of useful life. For example, a taxi cab may cost $12,000 when new. The taxi cab owner may use it for 3 years and then he will have to purchase a new one. The depreciation on the taxi cab on the balance sheet would be $12,000 minus $4,000 equals $8,000. Other fixed assets are fixtures, building, and land. Fixtures refer to equipment that is attached to the building. These are light fixtures and plumbing fixtures. Fixtures would also include items such as shelves and air conditioning and heating equipment. On the balance sheet, value of fixture and building would also indicate accumulated depreciation. But the value of land does not decline, and it shows no depreciation.
Do the formative test. Formative test 2. Family expenditures in the United States.
Considering that 2 pie graphs represent the average income use of family spirit by a period of 30 years, the difference suggests that changes of the greatest importance to society are taking place. Food is the first necessary occupied 25% in 1980 compared with 35% in 1950. On the other hand, rent for housing is necessity only slightly less essential, and the proportion of income it took up rose from 28% to 35% the period. There is an increase in spending on household appliances from 5% to 8%. Note that spending on transportation has remained constant, that is 10%. Although that amount may seem relatively unimportant, I believe that it is here that we see the most significant trends. Leisure expenditure shows for the greatest proportional increase of all categories, that is from 5% to 13%. Indeed, it is obvious that extra leisure expenditure is being achieved at the cost of these 2 vital areas, savings and education. Expenditure for savings drops from 5% to 1%, while expenditure for education decreases from 12% to 8%.
Module 6, Unit 3. Developing diagrams or charts. Module 6, Unit 3, Activity 7, Task 7. Suicide.
According to Centers for Disease Control in 1980, approximately 27,000 in the United States killed themselves, and 250,000 to 1 million more tried and failed. One category of suicide is called escapist suicide, which is motivated by the desire to flee from an intolerable situation. What groups are particularly likely to consider suicide as an escape? Those over 70 years old are at highest risk. Depressed people and drug abusers are likewise relatively probable victims. The incidence of suicide is high among single people too, especially among the divorced, separated, and widowed. During the last 20 years, the number of completed suicide among 15 to 24 years old has risen 2 to 3-fold.
Module 6, Unit 3, Activity 8, Task 8.1 and Task 8.2. Cost of treating airplane.
The cost of treating a light airplane is about $300, but that should be less if the airplane's access panels are already removed for a major inspection. The price to treat a larger single-engine airplane is about $350, while the cost for a light multi-engine airplane is about $400. Helicopters are somewhat more expensive to treat. The cost of treating helicopters is about $500.
Module 6, Unit 3, Activity 9, Task 9.1 and Task 9.2. Rabbit meat.
Rabbit meat still remains a favorable food in European diets. In 1971, 60 million kilograms of rabbit were produced in Italy and 30 million kilograms in France. Annual per capita consumption in 1971 was 7 kilograms in France and 1.5 kilograms in Italy. By comparison, it is noteworthy that the United States productions of rabbits in 1975 was estimated at 10 million kilograms, with the annual per capita consumption a mere 3/4 of an ounce.
Module 6, Unit 3, Activity 10, Task 10.1 and Task 10.2. Corporal punishment.
It is generally assumed that the corporal punishment in schools is administered rarely. It is false. The Dallas, Texas school system reported an average of over 2,000 cases of physical punishments per month during the 1971 to 1972 school year. There were over 46,000 cases of reported corporal punishment in California schools during 1974. About 3/4 of the adults in one survey were in favor of corporal punishment, only 17% opposed, and 8% unsure. Adults were parents, teachers, administrators. Clearly opposed were students, 50% against, with 25% in favor and the other 25% unsure.
Do the formative test. Module 6, Formative Test 3.
Foundations. When a structure is to be erected, a foundation is needed to carry the weight of the structure to the stratum of soil on which it rests. The soil is called foundation bed. Depending on the locality, one of several types of foundation beds may be used. Although any kind of foundation bed will settle somewhat, rock is usually preferred because it will support bearing pressures up to 15 tons per square foot. Gravel will support loads of 4 tons per square foot. Sand will support loads of 4 tons per square foot. Sand will support an equal weight if the lateral pressure can be held back. Clay, if it can be kept dry, will support 2 tons per square foot. Blood groups. The 4 major blood groups are O, A, B, and AB. This classification was established by Landsteiner and his associates in 1902. When blood cells are tested under the proper conditions, with serum known to contain a specific antibody, and no interaction occurs between the cells and antiserum, it can be assumed that the cells lack the antigens against which the antibody is directed. However, any interaction implies that the red blood cells process this antigen. Using 2 common antibodies, anti-A and anti-B, it has been shown that about 45% of the US population have neither A nor B antigens. 41% have only A antigens. 10% have only B antigens. And 4% have both A and B antigens.
This is the end of audio Module 6, Listening 3, PBIS 4222.